Welcome everybody, I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I must say that salmon was very nice, thank you very much. We have two plenary speakers coming up now who are going to do a bit of a double act on quality assurance, policy and procedures. First up is Marion Coy. Marion is the former president of GMIT. She is also a member of the IUQB. This is a bit of a lover of acronyms paragraph here. She's a board member of IUQB and ACSTI, and also a former member of HETAC. Right. She was a member of the Hunt Group and is now a member of the Research Prioritisation Steering Group. She's worked on quality assurance reviews at institutional and system level and has been a speaker at ENQA conferences and training programs for ENQA reviewers. So without further ado, Marion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicholas. The acronyms remind me of the former president in NUIG, Igor Murkathy, who was a wonderful speaker, who found himself one day, exactly like you did there, with a list of acronyms in front of him, and announced frankly to us all that he had discovered a good reason why he would write his own speeches in future, since he didn't know what any of the acronyms meant. I'm delighted to have a chance to speak to you this afternoon, and equally to have Paul here with me to do double acts. There are many occasions when we have found ourselves, I suppose, trying to work together on improving quality in the institution technology sector. And so I was delighted when I found the two of us were going to be here. And we have taken two quite different approaches independently. And for me, when I was asked to speak here on the business of quality assurance and enhancement, and where we're going to go within the Irish system, it seemed to me that what I'd write was where next. And as part of my own thinking for speaking here, I went back to read sections of Derek Bock's work called Our Underachieving Colleges. And if you haven't had an opportunity to read it, I'd strongly recommend it. Bock was the former president of Harvard, and with a particular interest in teaching and learning and in the student experience. And when he ceased to be president, thinking that he was finished and done forever, he went off and wrote a book called Our Underachieving Colleges, looking particularly at what students learn and how academics approach the business of teaching. So he set out all his best advice and all his thinking. And then, of course, the famous episode with Larry Summers happened. He had to leave Harvard in a hurry, and while they were waiting to get a new president, Bock was asked back. So he found himself having to come back and then deal with, in fact, some of the implementation of the change he was recommending in relation to teaching, learning, and quality assurance. So it's an interesting read from the point of view of the difference between, I suppose, the theory of what you should do and the practice of how you can get about doing it. But there's a great reassurance in the opening section of Bock's book when he outlines the history of lamentation in the United States in relation to declining standards. Every successive generation, he says, in the United States has always lamented that things were much better in the past. The students were better 10 years ago. The academics got on better with the students. The students were more biddable in the past. Lots and lots of different versions of it. And he tracks when various people regard it as the golden age, and equally their blunt statements about quality or the lack of it. He talks about the early visitors to Harvard at the end of the 19th century who complained bitterly about the decline in the standards of literacy and numeracy among students. He quotes Henry Adams, a student in Harvard, whose description of the teaching in Harvard at the beginning of the 20th century was they taught little and they taught it ill. That was his comment on his quality as a student. So I have come to the conclusion that this lamentation about a golden age in the past is simply a feature of the life we find ourselves in an academic environment. And therefore, much of the current discourse in Ireland and elsewhere about declining standards, about grade inflation, about fudgy quality, I think these matters should be taken in the context of this view we have as the past is always a different and a better place. I don't subscribe to it. I think there is a long interest in improving the quality of education in higher education. And I think we face a particular challenge for quality in Ireland at the moment, because we live in a climate, particularly as a result of the external economic environment, in which I can only describe as a witch-hunting climate. And it means, therefore, that being able to acknowledge failure or imperfection is actually very difficult. And quality assurance at its core is about that. There is no perfect quality assurance system, and there is no such thing as perfect quality. And the great difficulty for us, I think, right across the higher education system in Ireland at the moment, is that we need to gird our loins a little, and we need to gather our courage, and we need to find ourselves being able to articulate where we could be better. Because that actually needs to be the focus of quality. It's nothing to do with failure. It is to do with what's our capacity for critical analysis, which will lead us to be able to improve what it is we're doing and how we do it. So, in terms of where next, I want to look in that context at some of the questions for all of our institutions in Ireland at the moment. And I have a series of short questions. I'm going to give short answers to them, I hope. Just give me. But I also hope that perhaps some of these questions might be used to inform the approach to quality assurance within the system at the moment. There isn't a document on quality assurance I read, either Irish, in Ireland or internationally at the moment, which doesn't refer to this binary divide between quality assurance and quality enhancement. My belief is that we should abandon this false binary divide. I think we're dealing with quality assurance, and enhancement is an integral part of it. And one of the great reasons why I'm suggesting that this is a huge problem is that assurance has come to be associated with quantitative metrics and thresholds, and enhancement has come to be associated with the softer qualitative end of quality. Now, that kind of division will not serve us well. It's very often easy to measure that which is easily measured. It's much more difficult for us, I think, to work out how to assess the softer end of quality. But it behoves us, I think, to make a strong argument for the totality of that particular approach. The second, which is very closely related to this, is that I've come to believe that particularly as systems are evolving on an international scale, that there are two versions of quality assurance which are emerging internationally. And one group, it seems to me, are almost entirely focused on the notion of quality assurance as a threshold system. That what they're looking at are what are the minimal levels of prescription about which a system wishes to assure itself and about which it wishes to publish. The threshold approach, I think, will have a hugely detrimental effect upon quality assurance in an institution and in a system, and it needs complete and utter revision. I say so because I think, and I know again in the current environment this will cause difficulty. I belong in the camp which believes you should prescribe less and expect more. I think low-level detailed prescription is a route to threshold compliance. And for that reason, I think the business of the expectations we set about the nature of culture within an institution are far more important than threshold prescription. The third question is not original to me, and I take it because I suppose it's at the core of what has always concerned me about quality assurance. And all I have written down is, how do we know? How do we know that we have quality? How do we know that it works? How do we know what its components are? And I've actually stolen the question from another environment. Many of you, I think, may be familiar with the work of Craig Swenson in the United States. Swenson was responsible for setting up the University of Phoenix. Extensive experience operating in the private and public sectors and in quality assurance. And Swenson, to my mind, set out a number of years ago 5 questions which I think should stand at the start of every consideration of quality assurance. And these 5 questions were these. Do students know what they should know? Can they do what they should be able to do? Are they developing the values appropriate for their profession? Are they better able to achieve their life and career goals? And how do we know they know? Now, I would imagine that any institution which set itself to answer those 5 questions would go a very long way down the road of building a robust quality assurance system. And in doing so, Swenson is, I suppose, tracing his thinking back well over 1,000 years. There'll be many of you, well, not many, but there'll be some people here of my age and generation who will remember that one of the things you had to study in college in first year English was Aristotle. And if you go back and look at Aristotle, he had 2 things to say about quality, which Swenson has picked up. Aristotle's view on quality was that it is not enough to know, we must have and use it. That was his first statement. And his second one was that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Right. And that, I think, plays back into the question which arose this morning in relation to whether the Hunt report concerns itself with matters other than the utilitarian perspective on education or on quality assurance. Well, quality assurance, of course, must concern itself with the utilitarian dimension, but it is primarily a matter of attending to readiness and capacity and the development of those qualities in terms of the individuals who are participating in higher education. So there are the questions that I think give us at least a starting point in developing what I think is terribly important for every institution, that is the internal culture, identity and profile of that institution in relation to its thinking on culture. And no manual or no system of checks will ever substitute for that first stage in the development of a culture.